The morning I came home from a 12-hour shift at the community health center, the air was thick with the kind of damp Virginia heat that sticks to your skin. My feet throbbed in my nursing shoes. My scrubs smelled like iodine and stale coffee. I just wanted a shower. I just wanted my bed. Instead, I found 2 suitcases sitting on the front porch. They were mine. Graham stood in the doorway. Behind him was his mother. Vivian wore a beige trench coat, her designer purse tucked tightly under her arm, and her chin tilted up. It was the exact angle she always used right before she cut someone out of her life. 6 years of nothing, Vivian said. Her voice was flat, devoid of anything resembling human empathy. That is what you gave my son. I looked past her. I looked right at the man I had slept next to for over 2,000 nights. Graham shifted his weight. He stared at the porch boards. He would not look at my eyes. Out in the driveway, the engine of Graham's truck was idling. The passenger window was cracked open. A young woman was sitting there, scrolling through her phone. She was wearing a Holt Motors polo shirt. I knew her name without having to ask. Kelsey. She was 23. She was the replacement. I was 34 years old. I was a registered nurse, and in a matter of 30 seconds, I was being discarded like defective machinery. Mom arranged the paperwork. Graham mumbled to the floorboards, "It is better this way." Vivian took a step forward. Her heels clicked sharply against the tile. My son deserves a future. You can not give him 1. 6 years. Myra. Some women just are not meant to be mothers. I walked up the steps. I did not scream. I did not beg. 12 years in an emergency room teaches you how to lock your jaw and breathe through the panic. I grabbed the handles of the suitcases. They were incredibly heavy. I realized why when I lifted them. Vivian had packed my heavy medical textbooks at the bottom. She wanted me to feel the physical weight of my failure. She wanted me to know that my career was the only thing I had left. I carried them to my car. I did not look in the rearview mirror as I backed out of the driveway. I did not give them the satisfaction of a single tear. Let me tell you about those 6 years. Let me tell you what nothing felt like. Year 1 was full of naive hope. We bought the house. We painted the nursery a soft yellow. By year 2, the silence in that room became deafening. Vivian insisted we see her personal friend, Dr. Leland Fry. He ran the only established women's clinic in Barren, the absolute best. She had promised. I remember the hum of the fluorescent lights in his office. I remember his cold hands. I remember the exact tone of his voice when he slid the lab results across his desk and told me my ovarian reserve was severely diminished. He used words like unlikely and failing. By year 4, my body was a bruised canvas. Hormone injections that made me vomit. Shots that left dark, purple welts across my stomach. I tracked my temperature. I changed my diet. I stood in the shower and cried until I could not breathe, hating my own biology, hating myself for failing the man I loved. And Graham just watched from the doorway, arms crossed, waiting for the verdict. When I finally tried to get a second opinion at a clinic in Charlottesville. Graham canceled the appointment. He told me his mother had already spoken to Dr. Fry and there was no point in torturing myself further. I gave up. I let them lock the door on me. Now, I was living in a cramped, rented cottage on Orchard Road. The rent was $650 a month. The paint was peeling and the water pressure was a joke, but it had a porch. And next to that porch was a massive southern magnolia tree. In the evenings, the air smelled sweet and thick. It smelled like the first clean breath I had taken in half a decade. The house next door belonged to Wyatt Calloway. He was a quiet man in his early 40s, a retired county sheriff who spent his time fixing old engines and mowing his lawn in perfectly straight lines. We started drinking cheap instant coffee on my porch in the mornings. He did not ask intrusive questions. He just listened. One evening, I told him the truth. I told him about the infertility. I told him about Dr. Fry. Wyatt set his coffee mug down. I saw something shift in his eyes. A sharp, focused stillness. If you ever want a second opinion from someone who does not owe the Holts a damn thing, he said quietly, I know a place. As a nurse, I knew my rights under federal privacy laws. I knew I could request my complete medical file, but the fear had kept me paralyzed. What if Dr. Fry was right? What if I really was just broken? That night, the anger finally overpowered the fear. I called Barton Women's Health and demanded my records in writing. Then I asked Wyatt to make the call. We drove an hour and a half to Richmond. We pulled into a massive, state-of-the-art medical campus. The sign read, Callaway Medical Group, Center for Reproductive Excellence. I looked at Wyatt. He just shrugged. My father built it. I chose a different path. Inside, Dr. Priya Anand did not look at me with pity. She ran a completely fresh blood panel, an ultrasound, everything from zero. The call came a few days later while I was restocking the supply closet at the health center. Her voice was crystal clear. Myra, your levels are completely normal. Your ovarian reserve is healthy. There's absolutely no indication of diminished reproductive capacity. I sat down hard on a plastic chair. The vinyl squeaked loudly in the quiet room. My chest felt tight. What does that mean? Exactly. It means, the doctor said slowly, there is no medical reason you cannot conceive. 6 years. 6 years of poison running through my veins. 6 years of Vivian's cruel whispers. I hung up the phone. My hands were shaking, not from sadness, from a rage. So pure, it felt like ice water in my veins. 3 weeks later, the manila envelope containing my records arrived. I spread the papers across my tiny kitchen table. I cross-referenced the dates, the lab values, the physician notes. I read them the way I read a patient chart, coldly, systematically, and then I found it, the lab report for my comprehensive fertility panel, the document that had cemented my diagnosis. It was printed on Barton Women's Health letterhead. It was signed by Dr. Fry. And the date of the blood draw was clearly stamped Sunday, March 12th. Barton Women's Health is closed on Sundays. They have always been closed on Sundays. No exceptions, no staff. It was not a typo. I found handwritten alterations in the margins of other pages, changing perfectly normal hormone levels to elevated, alarming numbers. It was a forgery, a deliberate, calculated fabrication. My friend Gail, whose husband worked in the county clerk's office, pulled the financial filings for the Holt Family Trust. Right there in black and white was an annual charitable disbursement to Barton Women's Health. $8,000 the first year, $10,000 the next, $12,000 by year 5. Vivian had been paying a doctor, a retainer, to lie to me. Why? Because Graham was the one who was sterile. He was born prematurely. A medical complication Vivian had known about his entire life. When the pre-wedding tests showed Graham was severely deficient, Vivian made a choice. She buried his results. She bought a doctor, and she decided that whatever woman Graham married would bear the shame. I did not scream. I did not drive to their mansion and throw a brick through the window. I am a nurse. I believe in process. I sat at my laptop and meticulously filed a formal, evidence-backed complaint with the Virginia Board of Medicine. I attached the forged Sunday lab report. I attached the altered hormone values. I attached the financial records. And then I hit submit. The panic hit them fast. Vivian tried to show up at my cottage, offering to increase my divorce settlement if I dropped the nonsense. And I just smiled at her and told her to get off my porch. Then the Holts sent a corporate lawyer to the health center to intimidate my boss into firing me. Wyatt walked into the office wearing a tailored Navy suit that cost more than my car. He handed the lawyer a business card. He introduced himself as the sole heir and board member of the Callaway Medical Group and threatened them with a retaliatory interference lawsuit that would bankrupt their firm. The lawyer practically ran out of the building 2 weeks before the annual Holt Charity Gala. I took a pregnancy test. I sat on the cold bathroom floor of my rented cottage. I stared at the plastic stick. 2 solid pink lines, Myra and Wyatt. No fertility drugs, no tears, just 2 people who cared about each other. The clinic confirmed it later that week. It was twins. The gala was Vivian's grand stage. 200 of the wealthiest, most influential people in Barton County, sipping champagne under crystal chandeliers. Vivian stood at the door in a pearl gray dress, greeting everyone, maintaining the illusion of her perfect empire. Graham was there with Kelsey, looking miserable. Wyatt and I walked in. I wore a simple blue dress. The small, unmistakable swell of my stomach was just beginning to show. The whispers started instantly. Vivian's face calcified, but I did not have to say a word to destroy her. The medical board's timing did it for me. A notification chimed on a phone near the bar, then another, then 5 more. The local newspaper had just published an emergency online article. Local doctor suspended, pending investigation into falsified medical records. Financial irregularities linked to local family trust. I watched Graham pull his phone from his pocket. I watched his eyes scan the screen. I watched the realization hit him like a physical blow. He looked across the room at his mother. "What did you do?" His voice echoed across the silent ballroom. The string quartet had completely stopped playing. "Not here." "Graham," Vivian hissed, her perfect composure finally cracking. "You told me she was the problem," Graham yelled, tears welling in his eyes. "You paid him to lie to me." Vivian pointed a shaking finger at me. "I did what I had to do to protect this family. She is trying to destroy us." I stepped forward. The entire room held its breath. I looked at the woman who had packed my textbooks in a suitcase like garbage. "There is no family." "Vivian," I said, my voice steady, carrying to the very back of the room. "You made sure of that. 6 years of nothing. That is what you said to me on my porch. But the nothing was never mine. It was always yours." I turned and walked out. Wyatt held my hand as we stepped into the cool night air. Kelsey Brewer quietly put down her champagne glass and walked out the side door, leaving Graham entirely alone. The aftermath was absolute. Dr. Fry lost his license permanently, and he was indicted on felony fraud charges. The Holt Family Trust was investigated, freezing their assets and tanking the car dealerships. Vivian was ousted from every social board she had ever commanded. She became a ghost in her own town. Me? I married the quiet man next door under the magnolia tree. I had 2 beautiful, healthy babies. And I went back to my shifts at the health center because nobody gets to tell me I am broken. I knew how to read the chart. And I knew how to write the final prescription